Okay, we're going to talk about naval unofficial first day covers today. So the first question is, why unofficial first day covers? And I think all of us here collect naval covers, and I'm guessing maybe some of you might collect first day covers. Somebody's got a mic on. If you could turn that off because it's getting some feedback. And this is a topic that's got some feedback, somebody. This is a topic that's a cross between naval covers and first day covers. So welcome to the world of unofficial first day covers. What is an unofficial first day cover? Well, it's abbreviated UOFDC. It's a cover that's postmarked on the first day of issue of a stamp, but it's postmarked in other than the first day city or with other than an official first day cancellation. So a little history, first day cover collecting kind of started, well, early in the 1900s, but it really got the first cached first day covers was the 2-cent Harding issue of 1923 when George Lynn of Lynn Stamp News created a cachet. And at that point, some of the cached first day covers started coming into vogue. Coincidentally, about that same time, naval cover collecting was starting to become a big interest, and people were starting to get interested in that, mostly with cancels at that time. But by the end of the 20s, they were starting to look at cachets. And there were a lot of collectors that collected both types of covers. Some collectors combined the topics. They'd purchase stamps on the day of issue, and then they'd go arrange for a cancellation aboard a ship or at a naval facility, and that became naval unofficial first day covers. In the presentation you're going to see here, I try to list the city that the stamp was issued in. Sometimes to conserve space, I will have left that out. You may notice some of the covers have double borders. Those are scarcer covers. And I used a catalog which is extremely useful to first day cover collectors, called the Malone Planty catalogs. And there are a series of them, 18 volumes that cover 1901 through 1939. And they have illustrations of cachets, and they list the stamp Scott number for the stamp, the cachet maker, a description, and a price that was applied when these catalogs were made. Very, very useful for a first day cover collector. And here is my first one I'm going to show, 1926. This stamp was issued in Washington, Chicago, Cleveland, Dearborn, and Detroit. So a number of cities, but somebody, and the somebody was A.C. Roessler, if you know that name. Very famous stamp collector, stamp dealer. Ended up making some forgeries and other things, but he also made some real covers. He apparently went to the post office, bought the 10-cent map stamp, put it on an envelope, took it down to the Washington Navy Yard, and had it canceled at the Navy Department Station. So this becomes an unofficial first day cover because it was not issued at the Navy Department. You may recognize the name on the top cover. He's one of our crossover collectors, Dr. Evans. Big stamp collector, big first day cover collector, and a big naval cover collector. He did a lot of work with Dr. Losey. This stamp, which was for the Sesquicentennial Exposition in Philadelphia, was issued in Philadelphia. So you can imagine a couple collectors here bought the stamp, took it down to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and had it canceled on a couple different ships. The Erickson stamp in the upper right-hand corner was issued in Washington, and another Dr. Evans cover. He bought the stamp, walked it down to the Navy Yard, and had it canceled aboard the destroyer USS Dobbins. Another Dr. Evans cover, and we have to thank Dr. Evans for not only these first day covers, but many naval covers. So I always kind of find a thrill when I find one of his old covers because they're almost always from the 20s. This white plain stamp was issued in New York. Probably plenty of ships in the harbor, took it down, got it canceled aboard the USS Brooks in the New York harbor. Another stamp issued in Philadelphia, the Valley Forge stamp. The top cover, you may recognize the name on it, Dr. Losey, our famous naval cover collector who created the Losey system for cancellations. The top one is actually a double unofficial first day cover. The upper right stamp is the Valley Forge stamp, and the stamp on the left is a Molly Pitcher stamp, both of which have different dates, if you can see that, and those are both first day dates. So this is a double unofficial first day cover. And the bottom's got a nice postcard of Independence Hall in Philadelphia where the stamp was issued. And we can see that the Billingsley was in the harbor at the Navy Yard, and it was canceled there. This is another Losey prepared cover, and this is just a single one first day cover of the Molly Pitcher stamp issued in Washington. And I've always liked this set because I have an aviation interest. Civil Aeronautics Conference was in 1928, held in Washington. 2 and a 5-cent stamp were issued. And George Hill on the upper right-hand corner, another naval cover collector, but also apparently a first day cover collector, had that one canceled. And then the bottom one's a nice colorful cover, canceled at the Navy Department Station in Washington. So all of these that you're seeing are canceled on the first day, but they aren't canceled at the official civilian post office. They're canceled in naval facilities or naval ships. And here's another one, another Losey cover. You look at the killer bars, it's sort of saying Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So this stamp was issued in Washington. Somebody must have arranged to take the train up to Washington, buy the stamps, take the train back to Philadelphia, and then take it over to the Niagara and have it canceled. So these types of covers took some work. They weren't necessarily simple to make all the time. And one more Losey cover. Few too many Oklahoma cancels on it, kind of dirties it up a little bit, but Losey prepared the cover and he addressed it to our Dr. Williams and had it sent to him. First day, unofficial first day of the airmail beacon stamp, which is, I think, a very attractive airmail stamp. There was a stamp issued commemorating the Edison electric light, 1929. This one's addressed to Dr. Losey, and the cachet maker in this case is A.E. Gorham, who was an early cachet maker of first day covers, and you're going to see his name on several covers here. This one, there's the double borders I was talking about. This is a fairly rare cover. Another Gorham cachet for the 5-cent airmail stamp issued in Washington. That Navy Department Station got a good workout for making unofficial first day covers issued in Washington. We've seen it several times already now. This is the Massachusetts Bay Colony stamp in the upper cover with a nice cachet. This cachet is made by an N. Joseph and canceled aboard the USS Bainbridge, which was probably in Boston Harbor since the stamp was issued in Boston. The bottom one is actually a fairly common cover for naval collectors. I actually run into this cover quite a bit with the flag cancel in the USS Florida. This was for a stamp commemorating Charleston, and they're all like this one. They're all the same. It's addressed to a commander, Micajah Boland, who must have prepared all these, but he must have prepared quite a few of them because I do run into them quite a bit. Another Gorham cachet, not very fancy, but his early cachets weren't very fancy. This is typical of what he did. Massachusetts Bay Colony stamp first day, and canceled at the Boston Navy Yard in this case. There was a stamp issued commemorating von Steuben, who helped in the American Revolution. A guy named H.D. Egolf prepared this one on a postcard, which shows a statue of von Steuben, issued in New York, so we can assume the Northampton was in New York Harbor by the Killer Bars, and we have a nice unofficial first day cover here with lots of red. Here's a trio of Gorham cachets, all for the Red Cross stamp issued in 1931. You can see every cachet is different. So he had his work cut out for him, I guess, for this issue. He must have liked it or something, because 3 cachets seems a little bit unusual. Canceled aboard the Saratoga in the lower left, and Navy Department Station in the upper and the lower right. And here we have a Crosby cover. We all know the name Crosby. Well, Crosby was not only a naval cover collector, he also dabbled in first day covers. And so here he combined the 2 interests with a fairly rare cover, first day of issue for the Yorktown stamp, canceled aboard the Old Ironsides, which was at Yorktown on that day. And the cachet is fairly simple, but it notes that President Herbert Hoover was visiting on that day. And these are fairly rare. You may recognize 2 of them as being Crosby-Bazell covers. They're covers that are printed on photographic paper. That's actually a photo of the Arkansas and a photo of a painting of the Washington crossing the Delaware. Quite often the cancels on this slick paper didn't come out very well. They would blur a little bit. So these are actually 2 very good copies. And then the lower right is another Crosby with a non-photo cachet. All canceled aboard Old Ironsides. Well, sorry, not all of them. 2 of the Arkansas, 1 is Old Ironsides. And another Gorham cachet, 1932. That was kind of the year when you look at the first day catalogs, and you start seeing a proliferation of cachets being made for first day covers. Kind of coincidentally, that's one of the first years we start seeing in naval cover collecting a lot of cachets being made. This stamp issued in Washington, so we can see that the USS Hamilton destroyer was in Washington that day. Like I said, 1932 was kind of a turning point where we start to see a lot of cachets. Continued up till basically the U.S. entered World War II. And coincidentally, in 1932, that's when USCS was founded. And we see a lot of naval cover interest shifting from cancellations at that time to more of an interest in cachets. This is a second day of issue. Those were also collectible at the time, still are, I guess, but you can see in this case, the stamp was issued in Nebraska City. So kind of hard to find a ship that would be in Nebraska City, Nebraska. So someone did arrange to get the stamp on the second day and take it down to Old Ironsides, which was in Washington, and have it canceled as a second day of issue unofficial cover. Nice cachet, pretty attractive cachet made by Harry Iyer. Some more Crosby cachets. Both of these are fairly rare. Couple of stamps were issued for the 1932 Olympics held in Los Angeles, and Crosby and others made covers for those, and the fleet was in part of the ceremonies for the Olympics, so he arranged to get some covers canceled aboard some of the ships. Here we see the battleship Pennsylvania and the battleship Maryland canceling these covers. Another Crosby pair of Crosby cachets also canceled aboard ships, the Augusta and the Texas. See, the Augusta shows it was in San Pedro Harbor. The Texas used a killer bar of Los Angeles Harbor, pretty much the same place. But these are all unofficial first day covers for that Olympic stamp. A couple others. Top one is made by a guy named Edmund Miller. And the bottom was a Lynn print cachet. And again, that's George Lynn. So if you subscribe to Lynn Stamp News, that's the George Lynn we're talking about here. These are second day of issues. I'm not sure why these were second days, but well, I guess I do know. In hindsight, they were issued in Los Angeles, so second day getting a ship in Washington had to be a second day. So canceled aboard all Ironsides. Gorham cachet at the top, and then the bottom we have two cachets by eGolf, showing the two stamps, the 3 center and the 5 center. Old Ironsides was in Washington for several months. So in 1932, it became a pretty easy ship to go to get some unofficial first day covers as stamps were issued in Washington. So here we actually see a Washington stamp issued in Washington, canceled aboard Old Ironsides with a ship cachet. And same stamp. Top one, I don't know who made that cachet. The bottom one is a Harry Ior cachet. This is the booklet pane for the stamp. It's a little bit of an unusual, unofficial first day cover with the entire booklet. Fairly small cachet, but this cachet was prepared by the Society of Philatelic Americans, something which I'm pretty sure has gone by the wayside since 1932. This stamp, Garfield Coil, was issued in LA. Apparently the USS Relief was there. Our killer bar says Los Angeles Harbor. And the cachet is actually a stamp that's been applied noting the 1932 Philatelic Exposition for the APS. So kind of a neat cover. Here are several covers canceled 1932 of old Ironsides. Different stamps, 8-cent airmail envelope, the 3-cent Washington, and the 8-cent airmail stamp. The bottom cover with the stork carrying the little baby is a Stotzenberg cachet. And some more, like I said, old Ironsides became a good ship to get your cancels on. The William Penn stamp up on top, the Daniel Webster on the bottom, and 4 different cachet makers here. 1933, Edward Hackard made this cachet on top, the printed cachet. The stamp was issued in Newburgh, New York. I'm going to guess that the Brooks was probably in New York Harbor. Newburgh isn't that far from New York City, so someone probably arranged to get up there, get the stamp, and get back to New York City and get it to the Brooks. The bottom is the bird stamp issued in Washington, and a little hard to see because the cancel is blue on a blue stamp, but the cancel says it was in Washington, so makes sense that somebody got the stamp, had it canceled aboard the Cormorant, and that cachet is made by Rice. Somewhat of an unusual cachet here, cover here. It's the first day of issue of the imperforate stamp, and there were some imperforate stamps sheets made for the Chicago Century of Progress Exposition. The stamp was actually issued August 25th, yet this cancel says the 19th, so it seems to be an early unofficial first day cover. That's the fair logo you can see, and underneath it, it talks about being an anniversary, and we see the old Ironsides cachet there. 1934, stamp issued in Maryland, about Maryland, 300th anniversary of Maryland. canceled aboard the Maryland. I'm sure the Maryland was probably at Annapolis at the time. Whistler's mother in the upper right, canceled aboard the Reina Mercedes, which was at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And then at the bottom, we see a second day cover for the new 6-cent airmail stamp, canceled aboard the hospital ship USS Relief. I like the cachet. I don't know who drew the little airplane though. It's kind of cute. There was a series of stamps. If you're a stamp collector, you're familiar with the national park issues. Some very pretty stamps commemorating the U.S. national parks. Upper left, we have the Grand Canyon, and upper right, we have Glacier National Park. And at the bottom, we have Mount Rainier, all canceled aboard different ships or stations in Washington. You can see the Naval Research Lab in the upper left, that old familiar Navy Department station in the upper right, and then the Cormorant again, which was at Washington for the bottom cover. And the Grand Canyon stamp issued postmarked aboard the destroyer Williamson, which again, we see the killer bars show it was in Washington where the stamp was issued. And a nice cachet by C. Stephen Anderson. A lot of text talking about the park and a nice drawing of the Grand Canyon. The top one is another photo cachet. Oscar Hengsler made photo cachets. He made naval covers and apparently was into first day covers. This one canceled aboard the Manly in Washington. And at the bottom, we have a stamp that's commemorating the California Exposition in 1935 in San Diego. Canceled aboard the destroyer Dallas, which was at San Diego at the time. Here's pretty much the official cachet, official cover for the exposition. Fairly common first day cover, but it's canceled aboard the Dallas, so it makes it an unofficial first day cover. Here we have a double first day, unofficial first day. Well, it's an official and unofficial. The upper right-hand stamp is the Connecticut Centenary, canceled in Hartford where it was issued. And the cachet on the left goes with that stamp. The cachet in the center, Sam Houston, goes with the Texas stamp, which is in the lower right, canceled aboard the Texas. The stamp was issued at this Texas stamp was issued at Gonzales, and Texas was probably somewhere in the Galveston area. Some of you may recognize the name P.J. Eckeringgill. He was USCS number 4, fourth member. Certainly a naval cover collector. He did some cachets for naval covers, but apparently also a first day cover collector. All three of these are addressed to him. He lived in Rhode Island. Stamp was issued in Rhode Island. I suspect he arranged and did all these himself. Bought the stamps, put them on covers, and I imagine he is the one who arranged to get all the autographs. The different autographs on the cover are the mayor, an assistant postmaster, secretary of state. So different government officials for Rhode Island. The top cover is a silkscreen cover made by Risco Art Service. And then the bottom is a John Kilton cachet. This was this first cachet into the first day cover arena. And the bottom left, I don't know who made that one. It's a fairly simple printed cachet. You may recognize the name von Lossberg. He also did naval covers. In this one, he's got several connections here. The third philatelic exhibition in the US, Typex, which is what this stamp was issued for. So he's got a philatelic connection. It's an unofficial first day cover, and of course, canceled aboard USS Tattenhall. And the bottom, you may immediately recognize the blue and red writing. from Dr. Hutnick. Apparently another crossover collector. This for the Susan B. Anthony first day of issue. Canceled aboard the Potomac, who was in Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. 1937, if you're a stamp collector, you're familiar with the Army Navy set of stamps that were issued. There was a lot of crossover here, a lot of different covers you can find that are canceled aboard Navy ships for this series of covers. Top one is a cachet made by Norwood Scatchard, canceled aboard the destroyer Manly. The bottom is actually USS Decatur chapter cover, USCS chapter, canceled aboard the Herbert in Philadelphia. Different stamps, same Norwood Scatchard cachet. This one's got some hand coloring on it. The bottom is a fairly rare cover, I understand, made by Zube. You may recognize the name Zube. He did some naval cover cachets. Nice fancy cancellation from the battleship Texas. And a couple others here. The top left cover is from a Farragut chapter of USCS, canceled at the Naval Hospital in Annapolis. Upper right, we have a Crosby cachet. And bottom left is a Grimsland cachet. Grimsland cachets were mostly like this, some fairly crude but attractive drawings, usually multicolored like this one. And another Crosby cachet, photo cachet. This one, I do not know who did the cachet. It's actually a number 10 envelope canceled aboard the Manly, which we can see was at Annapolis. Annapolis was the site of the first day for the Annapolis stamp, which is the upper right-hand stamp. And below that is the West Point stamp. This I included. It is a very modern day add-on cachet. You can tell by the carrier because those carriers didn't exist in 1937, but it's just a very attractive cachet done by somebody named DeWitt. And again, we see it's using the Naval Academy stamp. Souvenir sheet was issued. First day was August 26th. And this one I can't really quite explain. Somehow somebody got it from Asheville, North Carolina up to Boston, where the USS Moffett was. Yes, it's possible they took the train up there. Possible this is a backdated cover also, but it's unofficial first day cover. And then the bottom one shows that one of the ships here, the Cachalot, was in New London, Connecticut. So somebody got the stamp from Asheville up to New London, Connecticut, all in the same day.
I can do that.
This is the Constitution Sesquicentennial stamp issued in 1937. And we have it here canceled aboard two different ships and a naval station and 3 different cachets. Harry Ior, we've seen his name before, did the lower right. And a historic society did the overall cachet on the top one, and then somebody named Oswald Ludwig did the one in the lower left-hand corner. This very much looks like a naval cover. If you're familiar with the Royal Hendricks cachets, it's very similar style. And this one's used as an unofficial first day cover of the Hawaii stamp, canceled aboard the destroyer Talbot, which was at Pearl Harbor that day. These are both second day cachets. Torkel Gundel, which is an interesting name, did the top cover. You can see it's addressed to a mail clerk aboard the Cachalot and canceled aboard the Cuttlefish. The bottom, I think, is an attractive colored cachet, again, made by Norwood Scatchard. And Richard Buchwald, you may recognize Buchwald's name. He also did a lot of naval covers. And these are second day. If you look at where these were issued in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Charlotte, Virgin Islands, canceled aboard. Well, we know the cachalot was. We know where she was. She was in Brooklyn, and can assume the cachalot or the cuttlefish maybe was also up there, or perhaps New London, Groton area. But that's why they're second day, because they weren't present in the cities they were issued in. You may be familiar with all the presidential series stamps. Here we have a unofficial first day of the half-cent Franklin, with the cachet by the Franklin Memorial Dedication Association. And the bottom, we see a Grandee cachet, another name who you can see crossover, and he did some naval covers, cachets. Canceled aboard Cachalot at the bottom, and canceled aboard the cruiser Philadelphia up at the top. USS Shaw for the Delaware stamp in 1938. And a Sanders cachet for the bottom one, again canceled aboard the Cachalot. We keep seeing this name come up, so it must have been a convenient ship to probably had a mail clerk very favorable to collectors, easy to get a cover and a cancel from. The Golden Gate Exposition was here in my area in 1939. Big deal at the time. Don't know who made this particular cachet, but it was canceled aboard the Saratoga that was present for the opening ceremonies. The World's Fair in New York was in 1939. And the Ellet, we can see, was in Brooklyn, New York, making that one an easy cancellation on the first day for that stamp. Here's another GGIE first day cover. This one's made by Espenshade, canceled aboard the Saratoga. And this is the official cachet for the first day, again canceled aboard the Saratoga. I think it's an attractive cachet, even though it's a common cachet. I think it's pretty attractive. And back to the World's Fair, this is a Spiegelberg cachet. This is fairly rare. Canceled aboard the Warrington, which we can see was at the Brooklyn Navy Yard when this was issued in New York. Washington's inauguration stamp, upper right-hand corner, as well as the lower left-hand corner stamp. So we have a two different unofficial first days. The bottom one being a Crosby, you can tell by the photo cachet, and the top one being a Zube cachet. Included these because you might think, well, that's an unofficial first day cover canceled aboard the Charleston, but the Charleston was actually the first day site for this Panama Canal stamp. So that's actually an official first day cover, the cachet made by Cachet Craft. And the bottom is a George Newman cachet for the printing stamp, 1939. And if you look at the addressee on that cover, you probably recognize the name Alex Hesse. So we see crossover between people we know as naval collectors also being first day cover collectors. Top cover, Ralph Waldo Emerson, canceled aboard the Hughes. Stamp issued in Concord. I assume the Hughes was probably in Boston Harbor, not too far apart. And then in the bottom, John Philip Sousa's stamp canceled aboard the Potomac, which was a presidential yacht based in Washington. The series of defense stamps, the 1, 2, and 3 center, which are fairly common. This is a Loring Standard cachet. It's actually a naval cachet for the ship, the USS Wautau. Not sure why that was used, but this is an unofficial first day for those 3 stamps canceled aboard the Potomac. Another Crosby cachet and the Potomac, a nice photo cachet of the Potomac at the bottom. And this was the first day of issue in Washington for the 6-cent airmail stamp, which would be used so commonly during World War II. And speaking of war, as the war came and US got involved, philately took a big back seat. You know, no longer were you allowed to go to ships and get philatelic covers canceled. So there were also many fewer stamps issued during the war. So we see there was really quite a drought during the early 40s of unofficial naval first day covers. We do see this one in 1945 near the end of the war, Florida statehood stamp, canceled at the Jacksonville Naval Air Station in the lower right-hand corner. The top is sort of what of a fanciful cachet. It doesn't have a canceled, doesn't have a date, but is telling us Jacksonville, Florida Naval Air Station, first day of issue. And this is a Saunders cachet. We've seen that name before. After the war, Navy Day 45 was a big thing for the Navy, and there was a stamp issued for the Navy. Top stamp issued, canceled aboard the battleship Missouri, and the bottom cover canceled by the ship at the Naval Academy all the time. Crosby cover at the bottom and a flugel cachet at the top, nice multicolored cachet. And a couple of Zube covers, Zube cachets for the Coast Guard stamp and the Texas statehood stamp. The top cover is for the Badge of Honor, Honorable Discharge emblem, canceled aboard the cruiser Baltimore. And the bottom, we have an Iowa statehood stamp, issued in Iowa City, canceled on the correct day, but I'm pretty sure the ship was not in Iowa City. So this one, again, I kind of wonder how it was arranged, and it's probably a backdated cover, would be my opinion. At the top, we see a familiar name for naval cover collectors, William Linto. Also did first day covers, this one for the Thomas Edison stamp. This one's another one issued in Ohio, and I don't think the Auburn was in Ohio, so then this may be a backdated cover. And the bottom is a Sanders cachet, canceled aboard the Midway, which probably wasn't in Washington, but it may have been near enough that it was easy enough to buy the stamp in Washington and get to the carrier and get this cover canceled. Attractive Zube cachet for the 5-cent airmail, 1947. The 100th International Philatelic Exposition was held in 1947, and they issued a stamp for it. This is an Artcraft cachet. You probably know the name Artcraft if you collect first day covers. This was canceled aboard the USS New Jersey and signed by the captain of the New Jersey. And the bottom is the souvenir sheet that was issued for that stamp exposition, canceled aboard a transport, USS Bear. Top, we have a Staley cachet for the 20-cent airmail stamp. And the bottom we have, again, this is not an unofficial, though you might think it because it's canceled Old Lord Ironsides. This was actually the first day's location for this Old Ironside stamp. So this is an official first day cover in this case. And a couple more for that stamp, canceled aboard other than the Old Ironsides. The top, we have a C. Stephen Anderson cachet with some text about the ship. And the bottom, we have another Saunders cachet. Attractive cachet by Cachet Craft for the California Gold Centennial, 1948. And what I also think is another attractive cachet, flugel cachet at the bottom for this airmail stamp that was issued. And here we have a card printed by Sanders for that same stamp canceled aboard the destroyer USS Charles R. Ware. The stamp was the golden anniversary of the 5 different boroughs of New York City. That's what this stamp was honoring. As we get to the late 40s, Zube changed the way he spelled his name for his covers. So now they were, instead of CZU Bay, they're now ZOO Bay, pronounced the same way, Zube. Top stamp was honoring George Washington Carver, and the bottom stamp honoring Youth Month with a cachet by a company named the Aristocrats. We've seen the Grandy name a couple times. This is a Grandy cachet for the Wright Brothers stamp issued December 17th, 1949, appropriately canceled aboard the USS Wright. Boy Scout stamp, popular topic among first day cover collectors. Top cachet is a Fulton cachet. The bottom one is a House of Farnham, who did a lot of first day covers. Art Master, another popular printer of cachets. This was for the FFA, Future Farmers of America. And again, this stamp issued in Kansas City. I don't know where the ATCA was, but I would suspect this may be a backdated cover. Pretty hard to get a stamp from Kansas City to wherever a ship may have been all in the same day. No cachet on this one, but it's a unofficial first day for the 4-cent airmail stamp issued in Philadelphia. Another Aristocrats cachet canceled aboard the carrier Ticonderoga for the Fort Ticonderoga stamp, 1955. And I threw this in here also because you may look at this and think, well, it's canceled aboard the Navy carrier Saratoga. It's an unofficial, but no, this is the location for the first day of issue for this stamp. Saratoga was in Norfolk. This was the first day of issue, so these are true first day covers. The top one is a Flugel cachet, and the bottom is an Art Master cachet. I do not know who made this one. Perhaps it's even a one of a kind. You can see it's signed by some lieutenant commander, so maybe he just made this for himself. But it's a kind of neat one. NATO Guardian of the Atlantic. And as we move into the 60s, this one is not a US ship. It's Her Majesty's ship, the Whirlwind. Applied her mark on this one to a stamp issued in New Orleans. So the postmark on the stamp is actually the appropriate first day of issue postmark for the stamp, but apparently the Whirlwind was there celebrating the Battle of New Orleans. Very attractive cachet, I think, made by the Crescent City Stamp Club. Admiral Byrd chapter, USCS chapter, made this cachet for the Fulton stamp. You can see JBT as the initials in the cachet. That would be Jesse Burgess Thomas, who one of our awards is named after. Robert Kennedy stamp, 1970s, on an art craft cachet, canceled aboard the carrier named after his brother, the John F. Kennedy. And the owl stamps canceled aboard the carrier USS Independence, 78. The Byrd chapter arranged some covers, which I think took some arranging and doing, and I'm glad to see they did this. The Colorado Silk Company made cachets for first day covers, and the Byrd chapter went to them and had these cachets made special for them for the first day of the John Paul Jones stamp. Now we're into the 80s. This one's a pretty plain cover, but it's kind of unique in a way too. It's also, it's got a full booklet pane That's what's running horizontally. And they use the cover of the booklet pane as, in essence, the cachet, all canceled aboard the destroyer USS Mullinix. The stamp was issued in Portland, Maine. It's certainly possible that the Mullinix was in Portland that day. An art craft cachet, celebrating a stamp that was celebrating the Battle of Yorktown. Nice cachet showing you the surrender in the bottom illustration. In the top illustration, we see the blockade that kept Cornwallis bottled up. And the admiral of the time was de Grasse. And we see the cancellation is aboard the modern ship, USS de Grasse, a destroyer, 1981. There's a stamp issued for Admiral Nimitz, 1985. This is a hand-colored cachet made by Van Natta. The stamp was issued in Fredericksburg. I do not know where the Nimitz was, but there are several different covers that I've seen canceled aboard the Nimitz. So someone certainly made arrangements to get the stamp, bought it in Fredericksburg, and got it to the Nimitz in time to get some covers. Bottom one, Statue of Liberty stamp. This is a Decatur chapter, USCS chapter, canceled aboard the USS Mount Whitney. And one other Nimitz stamp, unofficial first day with a panda cachet. Hawaii statehood. Can pretty well guess that since the stamp was issued in Honolulu, that's where the Willamette was, in Pearl Harbor. And top, we have the Liberty stamp again, canceled aboard the battleship Iowa with a House of Farnham cachet. Bottom one, we see another USCS chapter, the Puget Sound chapter made this cachet. Stamp issued in Milwaukee. Don't know where the ship was that day, so someone did some big arranging to get it there. Another Admiral Byrd chapter cachet, New Jersey bicentennial, canceled aboard the USS New Jersey. Stamp was issued in Trenton. Samuel P. Langley stamp, famous early aviator, had a stamp issued in San Diego. That's actually the first day if issue canceled at the top, but it was also canceled aboard the USS McKee, which I'm sure was in San Diego at the time. And this is a Bruce Speed hand-painted cachet. Eisenhower stamp, now we're in the 1990s. Canceled aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. And again, how somebody got a stamp from Abilene, Kansas to wherever the Eisenhower was, I'm not sure, but it still makes for a nice cover. And this is our last one, 1992, Midway stamp, issued in Indianapolis. That's the cancel you see in the left, so that's an official first day issue postmark. But it was also canceled aboard the USS Midway, same day. Very nice hand-painted cachet by Wild Horse. Today, it's pretty hard to make these covers. As all of us know, in the past 40, 50 years, an awful lot of Navy bases have been closed. The fleet shrunk down. They eliminated the Navy mail clerk in the Navy, so they're done by logistics specialists. Certainly security is much tighter aboard ship now than it was, say, 30 years ago. Pretty hard to get stamps from where they're issued to where the ports are. And so it's pretty hard to make these covers today. Not impossible, but certainly a lot harder. As you've seen in my collection here, there are plenty of older covers out there. You can start from the 20s, you can go through the 1990s, and you'll find covers. There's lots of them in dealer boxes. I find them on eBay. I find them in auctions. Quite often they're being sold and the person selling it doesn't realize it's actually an unofficial first day cover. It just looks like another naval cover. So they're pretty neat. I like them. It ties my collecting together because I started with first day covers once upon a time, moved into naval covers, so they're kind of neat. You're all USCS members, but there's also a First Day Society, the AFDCS, American First Day Cover Society. So if you're ever interested in that, you can go to their website and think about joining. And with that, I am complete. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. The last one you had, the Midway, I agree with you. That is a gorgeous